Thank you very much, our Lady Vice Chairman, who is chairing today's proceedings once again. I would like to take the opportunity to welcome very specially all our party officers who are present here this afternoon, but particularly Mrs. Joan Ewell Williams. Every week I call her and I say, stay home. Make sure that you look after yourself. Stay home. I'm so glad she's here. I would like to acknowledge my cabinet colleagues on the head table with me this evening, Member of Parliament for Laventille West, Sir Fitzgerald Hines, our Chair Lady, Planning and Development Minister, and of course, our hard-working Minister of Education, Member of Parliament for St. Anne's East, Mrs. Nian Gatsby-Dolly. And of course, we have a number of other parliamentarians here, and the Honourable Minister of Trade, the Minister of Communication, and of course, the Member of Parliament for Laventille East Mova, who we visited not too long ago. How is the pool going, sir? All right? Pool in Laventille West, pool in Laventille East, opening the pool in Maloney on the 12th, and so on. And so we had a pool in Digomatin a long time ago, one in Pleasant, it's San Fernando, in Coquille, right? So our children should be out there vaccinated and taking part. But I also want to extend a very special appreciation to all those of you who've taken this Saturday afternoon to come out and be here to give us the vibe to be able to speak to you as we speak to the national community. And I want to say a very good afternoon to the national community who's with us on the social media platform and on other platforms. This is a meeting where the government basically is taking the opportunity to report to the population. Politically, we have been fairly dormant recently. As you're aware, our heritage building is under renovation at Balizé House, unusable, and our new Balizé House is under construction. So Tranquility Street is basically an ongoing construction site that I'll mention a little later on. And most importantly, this time, we are here, February 2022. We are in the start of the third year of a pandemic. Since we have been re-elected as leader, I have taken the position that it matters not what is happening in the political arena, nor in the areas where they generate misinformation, that I, as leader of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, will focus virtually 100% in ensuring that we come out of this pandemic with all of us together. That has been my focus for the last 18 months. Today I can report to you that maybe there might be a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, because governments around the world and leaders like myself, we are beginning to feel a little bit better about COVID-19, because the science is indicating that there may be some kind of a change that we could look forward to that would be better in situations and circumstances as we go forward. We don't know exactly when, but as we go forward. The great fear that we went into Christmas with the coming of Omicron, where we thought that given that higher level of infection, transmissibility, that if it was as deadly as Delta, we would have been facing a pandemic of epic proportions. It is appearing as though the infections of Omicron, while being much higher than the previous variants. What the South Africans saw, we are now seeing here in Trinidad and Tobago, which is a higher level, a faster level of infection, but it is not resulting in an equivalently high level of sickness and death. And that is reflecting itself in a reduction in the amount of people who are looking for hospital care, even though those who actually come for hospital care in Trinidad and Tobago, because most of them come too late, they have to be looked after for a longer time, and many of them do not make it, and they end up dying, and we want to put an end to that along the way. So the virus is still with us. It is still dangerous, but it appears as though the most dangerous variant that we were fearing is not as harsh as it appeared to have been in the beginning. So let's keep our fingers crossed, let's keep our prayers going, and let's keep respecting the threat that is posed by COVID-19 and its variants. But in reporting to you, I can say without fear of contradiction that all the people of Trinidad and Tobago, wherever they have been contributing, that we banded ourselves together for the last 2 years and preserve the integrity of the state of Trinidad and Tobago. We spent, invested, and stayed heavily with our health caregivers, who today, once again, we want to say thank you and congratulate them. Whoever they are, wherever they are, they have been on the job, and notwithstanding lawsuit, bad-mouthing, misinformation, lies, and straight ingratitude, our health service in Trinidad and Tobago stood the test of time and continues to protect the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I am so proud as Prime Minister to have had to lead the health team that I am leading now and that I led for the last 2 years in a pandemic that has taken us from where we've been to where we are today. As we say that, we must not forget that there are almost 4,000 families that have lost members in this pandemic. But it could easily have been a whole lot worse. In some areas in the world, it has been far, far worse. We did the best that we could. We did not shirk the expenditure. We did not take it upon ourselves to say who dead, dead, and who live, live. We tried to save everybody in Trinidad and Tobago, and we fought, and we won, and today, I can report to you that vaccines are still available for any citizen who needs to be vaccinated, revaccinated, or boosted. Vaccines are available. We are even deep in negotiations. Only 2 or 3 days ago, I think it was, I signed a CARICOM document alongside all our my CARICOM colleagues, where we are seeking to get vaccines for our children ages 5 to 11. Parents, that is still an important consideration, and I trust that our children will be well served when we get our hands on appropriate vaccines to protect them so we don't have to report how many children would have died from COVID-19. We don't want to do that if we can avoid it. Ladies and gentlemen, in the period where we are dealing with the COVID as we still are, the government of Trinidad and Tobago had to dig deep in our resource base. High in our resource base, we borrowed home and abroad. We used our reserves and we used our earnings to make sure that no one was left hungry and no one was left behind in Trinidad and Tobago. We incurred debt. We expanded the social services, which was already a large entity. We expanded it. We gave tens of millions of dollars in food, fresh food to people. We encouraged farmers to produce, and we boxed that food and we gave it to the neediest. people who lost their jobs because their employers could not continue business, either because of the lockdown or because of the inability to continue the business for other reasons. They lost their income and they would have been starving in the street in this country. The government intervened and provided cash support for tens of thousands of people. Over 40,000 people got cash relief from the state, paid for largely by debt, because as you may recall, we have been in a deficit situation, borrowing in this country to keep our economy going, and in the pandemic, we just had to commit to borrow more to save lives and livelihoods in this country. But if you listen to some of them who appoint themselves national spokespersons, you would not believe that this little country had been such a powerhouse for its citizens. Go and ask those who depended on the state. Had the state not intervened in the way that we did and we are doing, what would have been the alternative? What? All those who are talking. But of course, there would be complaints that some person didn't get a grant here and some didn't get an assistance there, because we were assisting across the board, from Charlottesville to Cedros, from Carinash to Sangre Grande, from Caroni to Cunupia. That's what you're doing. So who would say that I would find no one that can have a complaint? But who is speaking for the tens of thousands for whom the government was the savior? We did that. And we are hoping and praying that 2022 would see us out of this dark wood situation. With respect to jobs, the government maintained the jobs of people on the public service, contract workers, workers in the Gazette. We never used job reduction as a tool to fight the COVID. As a matter of fact, there are people now still home, happy, just going to the ATM and they check the money coming in. There are some people who have not gone to work for 2 years and never miss a dollar. And unfortunately, some of them, those are the ones who don't want to go back out to work. The blood gets sweet. But ladies and gentlemen, we maintained the employment levels in the public service. Never a month was any public service department not paid. Most importantly, because of the circumstances that the pandemic imposed upon us, security became an imperative. And our national security departments, the police, the fire service, the prisons, they were all on the job throughout, all through the pandemic. Our security services were doubling up on the job. We should be proud of that. Yeah? From day one, remember the first time when we got those people off the ships who had gone cruising? The defense force was there taking them to the place of isolation. Those days we were so afraid of the virus that they were all in hazmat suits because the virus was a fearsome thing. Nowadays, everybody's a COVID expert now, and you know to ignore it and you want carnival. But then we were so afraid that you had to go near the bus in a hazmat suit. And the defense force was right there night and day. The one thing about security is that you can't have it and a gap and have it and a gap. Security is a 24-hour, 7 days a week assignment. And our security services continue to serve us. Continue. I remember when we said schools will be closed for the next 2 weeks. Remember that? Schools will be closed for the next 2 weeks. And children say, aha, holiday. We have some children in this country who have not been to school for almost 2 years. That, for me, is a painful situation. Because those junior children, absence from school is a denial of their personal development. They will never get back that time in their life again. And not interacting with their peers in the way that they have done, and they should. I'm not sure that we know how badly it's going to affect them. And that is why these ministers in the Ministry of Education, supported by the entire cabinet, we have been moving heaven and earth to get our children back out of school as safely as we can. There are some people, every time you talk about putting children out of school, they could tell you the angel wing is not white enough. The scale on the foot is not hard enough. The helmet on the head is not high enough. Every time you try to say, well, okay, we know it's a difficult situation, but we have to make the best of a bad situation. They are experts, because COVID generated one set of experts. Everybody with a cell phone is an expert. And of course, you know, we had an economy that was struggling since 2014. We came into government in September 2015, in the middle of an economic downturn, in case you all forget. The election was on the 7th of September 2015. I was sworn on the 9th of September 2015. And we saw the price of oil go right down to $20, as well as the gas price had gone down and the volumes of production were down. We were in a bad situation. And you think we got a pass? You think we got a pass? 1 year later, the front page of The Guardian was a published poll, September 2016. And the poll said that only 6% of the population was satisfied with the government, and 78% was dissatisfied. And of course, there were those who felt, we're back in government again, next election. Call the election now. Remember that story? Call the election now. Call the election. Because there are some people in this country who are only concerned about election and the prospect of election putting them back into office to do what they were doing prior to 2015. But we had other ideas. Our ideas were to do what had to be done to put the people of Trinidad and Tobago and their business in the best possible situation. And COVID came. COVID came and put us in a situation where it was life and death. Not election and election result. Life and death. That's what it was. And we have been here in this vineyard for over 2 years, and we're still there. Do not relax. Do not take it for granted. Do not believe that we are out of it. You don't want to be the last person shot in the last bullet in the war. You don't want to be that. You want to survive, to tell the tale, and it is still dangerous. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the PNM, it falls to us as a political party, as it has done before. It's not the first time that the PNM has been called upon to stand in the breach for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. You party officers, you party members, you office holders, you members of the cabinet, unfortunately, it is our portion to do the things that we have to do now. And unfortunately, they are not things that make us popular, but they are things that would make Trinidad and Tobago stronger and better. And that is why the PNM has to do it. Our public service has remained intact even as we go through the pandemic. Some people have been to work every day and some have been home because we use the public service to reduce the number of people who are on the move, and some people are still at home, but the public service remained intact. Our state enterprises, they have remained performing since the opening of after the first lockdown. And the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, it may have tottered, it may have stumbled, but it is still up and running. So, where are we now? If we assume that we have a slightly better position now with respect to the pandemic, and of course, the government's responsibility remains. We have had to make very difficult decisions. because the country requires difficult decisions to be made. And when I mentioned the Guardian poll, I mention it in the context to tell you, PNM people, that in doing this assignment for the country, expect to stand alone. Don't expect to be propped up and supported by some people who believe that failure is the only portion that we know. We have to have confidence in our country, in our people, and in our party to make the decisions that are required. Last night, I had to observe on the news a most pitiful sight and sound. It was the leader of a union who was cheering the fact that Petrotrin has been downgraded. Yeah. Cheering the fact that Petrotrin has been downgraded. I have been focusing on this job to make sure that the people of Trinidad and Tobago are put in the best situation in difficult and challenging outcomes. That's my only focus. And that is why, very early in the life of this government, in the last administration, we decided that we will have to focus on the Petrotrin situation. At that time, Petrotrin was owing, and still is owing, I don't know how much today, but at the time, Petrotrin was owing $850 million US dollars, which had to be paid by August 2019 or whenever it was. We had a date on which the check had to be written. At a time when we were struggling, and we still are, to pay public servants their monthly salary, and to pay the public debt, and to pay all the expenses to service the country. Petrotrin alone was owing $850 million US that had to be paid by a particular date. This government had to deal with that. In the face of that situation, the new government decided to send in a team of people to examine and report back to us on the situation in Petrotrin. They reported, the first thing they reported was that Petrotrin could not deal with that situation. That was a situation that only the Minister of Finance could deal with. And that Petrotrin, after we did the reviews, at the best estimates of the best condition available, Petrotrin would be losing in the next 5 years $5 billion. And having to import every day 120,000 barrels of oil, and as they refine it, they will be losing between $5 and $7 US dollars per day, per barrel. That was your business. This country had to restructure that business. $7 US dollars per barrel per day at 100,000 barrels per day. Multiply it yourself with a guarantee of a loss, minimum loss of $5 billion. Last night, when the leader of that union was cheering on the downgrade, I could tell you, in 2019, the restructured energy company, Heritage, subsidiary of Petrotrin, made $1.4 billion in profits after. That is after it paid royalties, it paid all its taxes, it had a profit of $1.4 billion. The following year, It made $1 billion in profit. And it has not yet been reported by the company, but I spoke to the chairman recently on my way here, and I could tell the country that your heritage company is in line to report approximately $1.2 billion in profit. So instead of a $5 billion loss facing you, we are reporting a $3.6 billion in profit in that short period of time. A difference of $8,000 million. And that is what was ignored last night when they were cheering the downgrade of Petrotrin. I could tell you, the downgrade is as a result of the company very carefully seeking to get the best for Trinidad and Tobago by going out and renegotiating the debt to be able to get better terms for the debt that Heritage is servicing. The very debt that Petrotrin could not have serviced. Heritage is servicing that debt and reporting the $3.6 billion in profit. So when the chair was going up for the downgrade, what the individual didn't know, okay, I'm sure he doesn't know that, instead of Petrotrin being downgraded, had we done nothing about restructuring Petrotrin, it would have been Trinidad and Tobago that was going to be downgraded. So instead of downgrading the entire country, where the Minister of Finance and the entire national borrowing would have been affected, the downgrade is only on Petrotrin. The debt is being serviced by the company and not by the Minister of Finance. Two things there. The Minister of Finance does not have to put any money into Heritage or Petrotrin, and the profit of $3.6 billion is available to the people of Trinidad and Tobago to service the expenses I mentioned earlier. I ask you this evening, had this government not have the testicular fortitude to restructure Petrotrin, what would have been our situation today? Before all of this, that said, gentlemen, leading people, because you're always leading people, because some people actually allow him to lead them, Leading people. As Prime Minister, having to deal with this Petrotrin situation, having put them, two of them, on the evaluation committee, as soon as they saw what had to be done and know what had to be done and didn't want to be part of anything like that, they jump off the committee and come outside the office in blue shirt to wave and shout at me. I invited him to sit down with me as Prime Minister. I am heading the cabinet. I want to share with him what the cabinet is thinking and what the information is and how we can go together, and refuse to come. Refuse. Yeah. You're running a union in this country, and the Prime Minister has to sit down and talk to you on an issue pertinent to all your members, and you refuse to come. Okay. When I addressed the nation, and you all can go back and check it if you wish, when I addressed the nation telling you that we are going to restructure the company, and as part of the restructuring, we are going to have to get out of the refining business, meaning we have to shut the refinery down, because that was the big money loser. I said that in the restructured arrangements, the government is prepared to offer the employees an employee stock ownership, meaning in the new company that we're going to form, whether it's Heritage or Paria, in that new restructured arrangement, we will give the employees stock, let them become a part owner of it. And to my horror and shock, my speech had not echoed around the room at the end that night when the answer was, go to hell with ESOP. We want no part of no ESOP. Well, let me tell all of them today what that meant. I, as Prime Minister, was prepared then to offer as much and to encourage the cabinet to offer them up to 20% of the new company. And had they accepted that offer, they would have been owners of 20% of that $3.6 billion. But they had no faith, no confidence. And as a result of that, their leaders led them away. But they say God looks after fools and little children and me. Because you could imagine if them so had their hand on 10% of that. Man, you couldn't. But for good reason. They refused employee stock ownership in Heritage. And instead, they form a company, paper company. And when everybody else in the world bid for the refinery, them alone bid cash to pay for the refinery. And they have not learned anything from that yet. Don't have a cent to even pay the lawyer, but you want to buy a refinery that was deemed to be unproductive, a big money loser to a government. You want to run it with no money and harassing me every single day about the refinery until you could be cheering that Petrotrin has been downgraded. Today I want to tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago, we could not have been in a sounder position in the energy sector. The price is good, the volume is going up, and it is well managed. And as for employment, Heritage has almost 500 employees. And as for those who went home during the restructuring, they went home with $2,700 million. $2.7 billion they went home with. You will never hear that from any of them. So if you make your decision based on the rah-rah and the dotishness, it wasn't the first time that they led their followers astray on employee stock ownership, you know. When the UNC was going to put FCB shares on the market for the first time, provision was made, shares put aside for the workers of the bank to be owners of FCB, you know. That's called an employee stock ownership. And the same thing with Petrotrin. They would not have had to pay for it out of their pocket, you know. The bank had put aside a funding arrangement for them to fund their ownership depending on how much shares they were entitled to. And then the shares themselves and the earnings could have serviced that loan and they would have become owners of the bank. And also, they were going to get the shares at a reduced price because they were employees. The public had to pay $25 for the shares. They were going to get it at $17. So from the day your name go on the shares, you were $8 up immediately. Those shares that they would have got at $17 are now worth nearly $50. 52? 62? You see, it's far worse than I thought. Shares that were available to them at $17 now worth $62. The leader tell them, don't, because it is privatization. And what is amazing is that people follow these people. And I know that this would be put across as though I'm anti-labor. Well, let me tell you something. I am not anti-labor. Labor has brought good and improved conditions for workers around the world all the time. What I'm against is dotish labor leaders who are leading workers astray. This party, the PNM, our record with labor is that many labor leaders served in this party in the parliament as a PNM senator, as general council member, and we still have good connections in labor where labor is prepared to be serious. We have never, in all this difficulty, in 6 years, there was never a year of plenty under my stewardship. It was always a year of difficulty for the country. But we have never used the reduction in labor on the state payroll as a solution to our problem. Never done that. Because we know what it means to have your job taken away from you. We know what it means to create employment. Because all the employment created in the state sector in this country, where the state is the largest employer of creator of jobs and employers of people, it was done by the people's national movement. Every single one of them. From Textile to TSTT to Petrotrin to WASA to TNTech to UTC, all of these are institutions that came into being under PNM vision. So don't tell me about PNM and labor, and don't tell me about PNM and creating employment. As for young people, all the opportunities for young people which are mirrored in this country from the 1950s to this day, and I'm a living example of that. From my boyhood to now, it was the PNM that was there making openings for young people. You, as a young person in the PNM, the name Vernon Glean, Natty Critchlow, Carl Tull, these were people who were party members and supporters. Owen Hines, many of them. And the very first PNM team that went out to the poll had a very strong label. Today, they want to tell you that we don't know and we don't want and we not labor. I'm appealing. In fact, let me make an appeal here right now. Since they want to say that we are leaving them out, watch this. Where's the Minister of Public Utilities? I'm instructing you now. Monday morning, write Natuk and Jitom and invite them to sit down with you. You explain to them what is happening at WASA, because all of us have to drink water. And get from them their input into solving the WASA problem. It's not sufficient to come on the news in the night and talk about who didn't get water, and who didn't get water. And there's one gentleman down in Penal Debe, chairman, who comes on the news in this multiracial, multi-ethnic society to tell the country that the reason why them men getting water in Penal is because of racial discrimination against the PNM. I want to tell Mr. Alan Sami, when you have nothing useful to say, just shut your mouth. Because the very night he was there saying that, on the hills in Carenage, on the plains in Diamond Vale, up in Laventille and elsewhere, there were similar people who were having challenges with the water supply. But there are some people in this country who believe that every problem they have, the only way to solve it is to stoke race and religion. I've had enough of that. Enough of it. So you call them in officially, and you tell them, I'm making it in front of the media now, you tell them that you have been instructed by the Prime Minister to sit at the table with them and receive from them practical solutions as to how to deal with the WASA problem, because there is a WASA problem. Yesterday, I was in the Parliament. I led a bill in the Parliament telling this country that this country has a corruption problem. There are 42 members of Parliament. One isn't allowed to take part in the debate, but 41 is allowed to take part in the debate. And not one of the 40 could have argued with me and say I was wrong. No, the country doesn't have a corruption problem. So I take it to mean that every one of them representing 41 districts know that this country has a corruption problem. And you come to the Parliament to pass legislation to create protection for people who you call whistleblowers, who know something of value, and making that available to basically law enforcement through certain channels, and they have a problem with that. Munilal lied and lied until he's saying to the Attorney General, look what you bring here. Legislation like this, which exists nowhere in the Commonwealth. Munlal is a lawyer. Munlal is an experienced parliamentarian. Munlal knows he's lying. But he gets up and says that. Because our law is not yet passed. It's now being debated in the parliament. But it is patterned on the Jamaican law. The last time I checked, Jamaica is a major member of the Commonwealth. And the Attorney General, when they did this work early in our term in 2015, he looked at all the major Commonwealth areas and see what their laws are to be able to pattern our law on Commonwealth jurisprudence. Australia, New Zealand, India, Malta, Malaysia, Jamaica. And Munlal gets up in the parliament yesterday and say, show me. And he knows that the AG could show him, eh? But those of you who are listening to the soundbite, if you were listening to him at that time, and that was all that was coming through your ears, you may not believe that this legislation exists widespread in the Commonwealth. And around the world, there are 59 countries that have that legislation on their books. And there are 29 other countries that have similar legislation, not as standalone legislation, but as part of other legislation. Yet, an experienced parliamentarian in Trinidad and Tobago, in seeking to create an environment of doubt and to lead the population of Australia not to support the bill, said, it doesn't exist in the Commonwealth. Didn't stop there, you know. When he lied, he don't stop one place, you know. Trotting like a horse. When he was talking about something to do with contracts. And of course, he was talking about the Port of Spain hospital and how they discover that the contractor stopped the contract. And they're talking about the government having some other contractor to put in, so we're pushing out the contractor who is there. The contractor who is there is Shanghai Construction. Get the logic, eh? Shanghai is the contractor that is there. For the last few weeks, they got a document and they're using it that way. We are trying to push out Shanghai to bring in some contractor of our preference. And you will hear that now and think the government corrupt like them. But yesterday, in the debate, in the suite of lies that he was telling, oh, Shanghai Construction is building a party headquarters in Port of Spain. Now, he didn't say PLM headquarters. But logically, who else is building a headquarters in Port of Spain? So when he got up and said Shanghai is building somebody headquarters in Port of Spain, you know what he's saying? He's saying that Shanghai is building the PNM headquarters in Port of Spain. All I will tell Munlal, if Shanghai is building the PNM headquarters in Port of Spain, rest assured that all the equipment at Balizi House will have Shanghai name on it. Unlike when SIS was building the leader house, where they paint off all the labor of the equipment while they build the leader house. So in one breath, we are pushing Shanghai out of the construction at the hospital to put in a friend. But in the next breath, on the other side of the mouth, Shanghai building our headquarters. So a contractor who is building your headquarters, you're pushing them out to bring in somebody else. And this somebody else here, they're getting at, you know, I so know the UNC for a long time and I see them from far, you know. And when I don't see them, I smell them, you know. That argument, the next thing you will hear, right? Because what they were implying, I don't know if you all had heard of a name, Alan Warner. Alan Warner, remember the opposition leader in parliament on platform, calling the man name. But you know, a few days ago, I became familiar through the internet with a woman called Cheryl McKissack. There's a company called McKissack & McKissack. And Those of you, especially you people here in Laventille, you should research that. There's a fellow called Moses McKissick. I'm sure none of you ever heard that name. Moses McKissick was a slave brought into America in 1790 by Mr. McKissick. So this slave, like all of us, got McKissick as his name. 1790, a slave. Cheryl is fifth generation McKissick. Because Moses, that slave, learned skills, became a businessman, building blocks. And today, his fifth generation, McKissick and McKissick, is the largest engineering architectural firm in airport and other civil construction in New York and maybe in America. Doing billions of dollars of airport construction. LaGuardia Airport, $4 to $5 billion work. Subway, building subway in New York, $34 billion. Black family business. I tell you this, so that when anybody tell you that black people ain't had the head for business, remember a fella called Moses McKissick, a slave. When you go to JFK and it's dazzling you, Cheryl's firm, McKissick and McKissick, is the engineering architectural project manager for the upgrade of JFK. Tens of billions of dollars in work. But in Trinidad and Tobago, I have to listen to the opposition leader carrying on a tirade, lying, casting aspersion on an independent private business that had the temerity to come out of Tobago and seek to expand their reaches into Trinidad. That is the country we live in. So today I want to tell Mrs. Prasad Bisesa that the Warners were in business long before she was anybody, and she's still a nobody. But I get back to WASA. You may want to know what is the task. You may want to know what is the task I've given Minister Marvin Gonzalez. And I want you all to follow this, Follow the media. Because you see, in 1998-99, when the UNC, in trying to deal with the water problem in this country, set about to solve it by desalination, I was an opposition member. Ganga Singh was the minister. Remember that story? Water for all by the year 2000? We all wanted the problem solved because, I mean, you all know the inconvenience and the unhygienic conditions that some people live in because water is life. Water is health. Water is almost, after blood is water. So the government of the day wanted to solve that problem as the government should. But they came up with a solution to go into desalination. I remember I objected to Trinidad and Tobago going into desalination for water because I had just spent a fair amount of work periods in Curacao and Aruba, and I became familiar with their water supply. And what struck me was the expensive nature of their water supply. Every cubic meter of desalinated water had a serious price to it. And therefore, when I was a member of parliament and my colleagues came and said, we're going to get our water supply from desalination, I objected. As a matter of fact, if you go to the Hansard, you will see me moving a motion. And I asked a simple question, because they were trying to sell it as water for Point Lisas, because WASA was supplying water to Point Lisas and getting a good price for that water. and using that money to subsidize WASA. They came and said they will desalinate and use the desal water for the Point Lisas estate where a good price could pay for the expensive water. And I asked the question then, will that water get into the domestic supply? They wouldn't answer. Will the desalinated water be used in the domestic supply? Because at that time, WASA's cost per cubic meter was $1.65. This water was $6. And they said, no. I said, okay, because if that desal water is what's going to be in the domestic supply, the government is going to have to subsidize it something humongous, or the users are going to have to pay a huge price because the desal water is expensive water. They didn't listen, they brushed me aside and they went ahead. Today, we are heavily dependent on desalinated water. Every 6 months, there's enough water running through this country to drown an elephant 1,000 times over into the Gulf of Paria from every river. We could have built many more water catchment areas in catchment areas like North Orapuch and other areas and supply community. No, we're going to desalinate. This is a cabinet note that was approved. It's dated January 25th. This is WASA in the cabinet. WASA in the cabinet, because WASA lives there. And this is an approval for a bank to keep on providing, keep on keeping on. $60 million to pay for desalinated water for a little period. This is what has been going on. And the government is never in a position to pay that money for WASA. So the government goes to a bank and borrows it. I have since researched to get the cost of borrowing, and the story goes like this. In dealing with that facility for WASA, you, the taxpayer, we're running a debt of $324 million. And that's a growing debt, because so far, we are largely supporting mainly the interest and a little of the principal. And that's going to go on until 2034. But you would think if we spent that kind of money, that we would have solved the water supply problem. No, sir. This company is providing only 40 million gallons per day, which is a fraction of what WASA needs to service the country. So 40 million gallons through the desalination plant in Point Lisas alone is responsible for eating up that mountain of US dollars. But the rest of WASA is supplying 194 million gallons per day. Try and figure it out. So the bulk of the water is being supplied by WASA from non-desal means. But that plant in Point Lisas, which we are contracted to till 2034, supplying, what, 17%, is it? 17% of our water supply has bankrupted WASA. WASA is bankrupt in the simplest of terms. And that bankruptcy has not been affected because the cabinet intervenes every so often and provides money in this humongous way only for the supply of that desal water. It doesn't mean it's paying for the distribution or the transmission, you know. That is just for the supply at the plant. And that is what this country has to deal with. So if you want to get a flavor of the WASA situation, you start with that desalcut and desalinated water has bankrupted WASA. Because WASA's revenue, this desalination is what, almost 80% of WASA's revenue? So whatever revenue was, all your water rate, can't pay this. And that is only for supply. WASA has to find money for every other thing else that go on in WASA. Supplying other water systems, staff, security, whatever, chemicals, everything. This is only a pebble in the shoe. How does the country deal with that? Do we leave it that way? And the mountain of US dollars keep growing, and the bank debt keeps rising, and the interest charge keeps rising, and every so often WASA comes to the cabinet and says, I want $60 million more. Because the minute the payment is late, the arrangement is that you must pay within a month. The minute the payment is late, you hear on the news that they have maintenance. They turn the water off. And of course, the UNC, the same UNC that put us in this situation, start to mobilize their firms to jump up and down, that they ain't getting water, and the PNM wicked, and we discriminating against Indian people. That is what our country has become. So, I am anxious to hear how you'll make out. But I have in my possession, which you will share with them, the WASA restructuring documents, right? And I give you 6 weeks to come back to the cabinet on your outing and your escapade and your adventure. And you could co-opt any other minister you wish to accompany you. But you see, there are some people in this country who only see their role as making janjat, mischief, couture, bacchanal, and reggae. Nothing good to attract their attention for a favorable comment. Would you believe this government that I lead, we raise an issue about the mismanagement and the mishandling and the want to know what happened with land acquisition on the highway going to Point 14. You need to know that, and there's a commission of inquiry into that because they like to call for commission of inquiry. I've been raising for 7 years this matter of who took out the clause from the contract to allow the contractor, OAS, to go away with $921 million that I had to send Stuart Young and a legal team to lawyers and courts abroad to try and get it back. Their way of dealing with that, not a sound. I have asked that question for 7 years. There has never been a response from anybody in the UNC, and I've never seen anybody in the media ask any of them a question on it. Never. We are supposed to just accept that as par for the course. $921 million. I've never seen a column in the newspaper on that. As I was asking, what was the nature of the business between a UNC minister and OAS in a hotel room in South Africa a week before the contract was awarded? They have never answered. They pretend as though I have never said a word. And I've never seen anybody in the media ask them anything. But today, the Guardian is going to be asking me for a comment, which I'll answer now. And they want a comment as to why Faris is still in the cabinet and why I have not asked him to resign, because Kamala say he sold his car to Kewal Singh and they didn't transfer the car. That's what the Guardian is interested in. Any damn foolishness that the UNC come up with, the Guardian is interested in it. But I've been raising $921 million of taxpayers' money that they try to thief. Not interested. I've been raising the matter of the Key-Up interchange that caused a cabinet reshuffle. The last cabinet reshuffle in the UNC was the Key-Up interchange where they were going to thief $300 million. And telling me that Farish should resign because he's under police investigation. I have never seen the Guardian asking whether Paderat will resign, because he's under police investigation. I have never seen the Guardian asking whether Munilal, former leader of government business, loudmouth around in the parliament, trying to hold everybody to a moral standard. Justice Aboud called his name 13 times in a judgment where he has to go on account, where a state enterprise has complained about his misconduct. A judgment, not an allegation on police. This is a judge who adjudicates on a matter and say, yes, you have a question to answer. I have never seen the Guardian ask about that. I have seen David Lee in the parliament as opposition chief whip. Every day we go to parliament, there's something to ask. I have never seen the Guardian ask him. He is under police investigation for $1 million in motor car tax that he needs to explain to you, the taxpayer. I never see that. But I could tell the Guardian this evening, with respect to the transfer of a motor car, maybe I should resign too. Because I bought a car from an executive a few years ago, kept it for a while, couldn't get the car transferred because the records in licensing office was a mess. The executive died while I'm trying to transfer the car. Tried to sell the car to another executive. Took me a year and a half. And eventually the licensing office, after they dig in Chagaramas for months, had to concede that they couldn't find the record. And the man's wife had to go and tell that, yes, my husband sold this car to this gentleman. That's how I was able to get the car transferred, probably on honor. But you come to tell me that Kamala write the police and tell the police Faris, I don't know what she have with Faris, you know. Maybe Faris knows. The last time she go on platform and say the only pipe she knows, Faris is not the Minister of Public Utilities. The other day, I was in Castara with a friend. We were just relaxing. So we went into a shop and bought 2 beers, and they handed me the beer in a paper bag. And I'm walking out to the car, the beer is frothing. So I put my mouth in the froth, as you would all do. And as I did that, somebody said, you're drinking beer in public, that's against the public health. Come on platform, calling on police to investigate me and to charge me for breaching. So if the police had followed her and charged me for putting my mouth on that bottle in Castara, drinking beer, and I'm under police investigation, and you want a new prime minister, and she wants to be the prime minister. I want to ask you all to ignore the dotishness, the lies, the misinformation, and focus on what is real and of substance in this country. What is real is what the Minister of Education just told you this evening. We have children home, we want to get them back out to school. We have teachers home, they're coming out, they want to be safe in school. We have money to pay for debt that they incur and money that they thief. We have a Minister of National Security today to tell you he's working with the police to improve their ability to fight the criminal element. That is real. And you know, it's not one, it's all of them, you know. It's all of them. There was another one from Chaguanas West, I think it is. No, he's a lawyer. He's the one in agriculture. What's his name? No. Anyway, one of the MPs from Central there, he gets about 10 minutes on the radio to talk about the government disrespecting farmers, disrespecting those who feed us. Ladies and gentlemen, in this pandemic, the government and the farming community had never had it better. The last bill that came to the cabinet for approval, it wasn't approved on that day because we had to pay it from a different source. It was $44 million for NAMDEFCO. One of the bills, $44 million. One of the bills for farming produce that we encouraged and took and distributed to people during the pandemic. Free of charge. The farmers never had a better market. And I'm not here talking about the hundreds of millions of dollars in support for farming in all its forms and fashion. I'm talking about the pandemic alone. But I have to listen to some imp talking about government disrespecting farmers. Half of them don't know what a farm looks like. They're always talking about their sons and daughters of cane farmers. My father used to work in Caroni. They wouldn't know that. And they're so into stupidness. I'm minding a handful of goats, sheep in Tobago, that on UNC platform. All I could tell her, just keep your friends away from there. Ladies and gentlemen, some people ask me from time to time, how do you manage? How do you make it? I tell them most honestly, most sincerely, that I rely on your prayers and your support and the good sense of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. With all of these things that need to be done, this country has one prime minister, and the buck stops with me. And my job is to do the job. And I'll try to please every one of you, but there are some people who cannot be pleased. But I will do everything possible to ensure that you get the best out of even the bad situations. And I'll do everything possible with this PNM to ensure that those who have hurt you, those who lie to you, those who believe that going in office is only about themselves, that they don't see the corridors of power in this country. Imagine yesterday, I am talking about Cambridge Analytica. And they got up and trying to lie to tell me that Cambridge Analytica did not play a role in Trinidad and Tobago. As if by saying so, it will be so. The company has been closed down. It exists in different forms, but the company Cambridge Analytica has been closed down because when the British government came at them and exposed them for what they were, we in Trinidad and Tobago turned out to have been the guinea pigs for the model, and we accused the UNC, and we still do so, for giving Cambridge Analytica the national databases. In Mr. Wiley's book, he says they were shocked that the government could have been so generous to give them the national database. And when they negotiated with the experts from Russia, who were using the methodology, they gave the expert, in lieu of payment, the Trinidad and Tobago database. That is what the UNC did. It's written in record and is in the Parliament of England as testimony given under oath. But then yesterday I had to hear these UNC imps who still inside the Parliament behaving as and trying to call me a liar. So they go and march. They're going to march on the foreshore. Is that right? This is still a free country. If you have nothing to do when the day comes, you have plenty of time to do it. The day still has 24 hours. They're going to march because engineeringly, not for the first time, where we are building a road between the sea and the lagoon, where you're building a road, you're taking material in and put it there to build a road. One portion of it has some subsoil, subsurface matter. We are waiting to hear engineeringly what the problem is, because the sea is still there, the lagoon is still there, and the road is still required. But Munilal, leading people to go down there and talk about how much $1 million is going to be lost, he has no interest in how much million was lost when the UNC government bought Eden Gardens for $120 million more than the valuation. He has no interest in that. He has no interest in the $400 million that the cabinet approved to be distributed in August and September of 2015, which today is in the courthouse. And after what they said yesterday in the parliament, I have instructed the Attorney General to come to the parliament and give you, the people, a summary of all the matters that we have been involved in so far. Give you a summary of all the claims that were being made, claims that have been settled and not settled, to let you get a flavor of what we have been dealing with, because you see, the secrecy that they want is what they're hiding behind, and I am not keeping any secret for anybody again in this country. I will tell you everything I know. I know under law, I'm not supposed to be acting sub judice on matters, but sub judice doesn't mean that you have to be ignorant to what is going on around you with your assets and your money. You need to know. If you come to my office at La Fantasy there, you would meet my office. I have a computer on which I do the work. I have my cell phone here, and I have a TV there. So once I'm there, I'm linked to 3 things at one time. I follow in the United States where complaints are being made, stories. Then I see people being accused. Then I see them being charged. Then they're arraigned. Then they're tried. They're convicted. In Trinidad and Tobago, can't see nothing. And that's what they love. And you can't mention it, because if you mention it, it's sub judice. Sub judice, my auntie. You, the people, need to know what is going on. And I will tell you. I would not be irresponsible, but you need to know what is going on, and then you will understand the level of bold-facedness that is taking place in our parliament and outside of our parliament. You wouldn't think that these are the people who are costing us. And you know another question they have? What we paying lawyers to go after white-collar criminals. So in other words, you could do what you want criminally, and I must say, well, it costs too much to go after them. That's what they want. Well, there's a requirement for this government to fight white-collar crime. Yesterday he said the government is coming after them. Who you want us to go after, Maduro? Kit Mitchell in Grenada? According to our laws and jurisprudence, you go after people who have questions to answer. Is accountability? Who you want us to go after? Your name in the courthouse. I mean, some of the things that are available for your information would not only shock you, it will disgust you. And to hear them talking now about whether I am going to, and getting people to whether I am going, I will do what has to be done. If there is a requirement for a minister to be removed from the cabinet for misconduct, ask any of them, I will be the first to remove them. But I'm supposed to remove Paris because Kamala wrote a letter. That is grounds alone, not to even look at it. You remember her behavior with Dansan Damsuk? Come to the parliament and read out handwritten accusation against Eric Williams and Frankie Khan, and then Dansan Damsuk go and tell the authorities that this was done in collaboration with them. And of course, they got 2 ministers destroyed. Remember that? That was Dansam Dansuk. The next one was the Prime Minister friend, A.V. Drilling, on platform every night, going into a general election. Their biggest point every night was fake oil, fake oil. Get Petrochin to make a fool of themselves to the cost of $1 billion. 3 of the best judges in the world sit on the matter and rule in AV's favor. That is for she and the court. But the bottom line is, Petrochin is a state company. It's your company. So I've instructed the Minister of Energy to lay in the Parliament next week, Friday, the full unabridged details of that arbitration. So you could read it. So when they come in to pretend it is not so, and going on every Sunday they have press conference to talk stupidness. Every Monday night they have forum. And then Thursday and Friday, they're in your ears all the time like an old bee stuck in your ears all the time, but they have nothing useful to say. I want you to read those documents and figure out if anybody in their right senses could be talking about, when I get back into government, I am going to reopen the Petrochin matter. What is there to reopen? Yeah? And you have another one talking about the police is investigating it. The matter has gone to arbitration. 3 super judges sat on the evidence and ruled that Petrochin had not lost anything. What you want the police to do? To be able to continue your political foolishness. Well, you can do that, but the people must know what the arbitrators say. So from today going forward, there will be continuous series of meetings between the population and the Prime Minister by conversations. I have left the field open for 1.5 years, and during that time, chat away, mice play. The PNM has returned to the battleground. And in so doing, it is for a singular purpose. We will educate, and we will liberate you from the nonsense that passes for political activity in Trinidad and Tobago. The only thing we're sorry about, that we have 22 seats. And 22 seats cannot pass whistleblower legislation. But when we resume at an appropriate time in the Parliament, you, the people, will look and see who is doing what. If they don't vote for it, you will not have it. After that, very soon after, we'll be coming with campaign finance reform legislation. That we will pass because we have the votes to pass it. And we will do what has to be done to bring about local government reform. That is the work program going forward in the coming months, and we will ensure that you don't make decisions based on ignorance, but you be a well-informed, well-intentioned population, and that's why you say, great is the PNM, great is the PNM, great is the PNM, and we shall prevail.